At 1 a.m., I heard pounding at my door. When I opened it, my son collapsed in my arms, his face pale, his voice trembling. "Dad," he whispered. "She tried to kill me. Carla chose her lover over me." The words cut through me like a knife. After all I'd given, all I'd sacrificed, betrayal had walked straight into my house. But as I held him, I wasn't just a broken old man. I had already started tracing their lies, and I carried proof that could turn their scheme upside down. And when Carla showed up at the hospital the next morning, pretending to cry, she had no idea what was waiting for her. Follow my story until the very end. Subscribe to the channel, and comment the city you're watching from, so I know how far my story has reached. The night had been restless from the start. Silence wrapped around the house, but sleep never came easy anymore. Too many nights spent staring at the walls, listening to the clock tick like it was counting down something I couldn't name. I sat on the porch, the wooden boards creaking under the weight of old bones. A thin blanket draped over my shoulders. The air carried the kind of stillness only found in the mountains of North Carolina at that hour, when even the crickets seemed to fall quiet. Then came the pounding, sharp, desperate, and out of place against the night. The sound rattled through my chest before I even stood up. My heart kicked harder as I shuffled to the door, hands trembling before they even touched the knob. When I opened it, the sight nearly buckled my knees. Daryl, my boy. He collapsed forward, heavy in my arms, his body limp like it had been drained of all strength. His head hit against my chest with a dull thud, and I caught him by instinct, lowering him down onto the wooden floor of the porch. The blanket slipped from my shoulders, and suddenly the night wasn't quiet anymore. It was chaos, breathing in gasps and shudders. "Dad." His voice was faint, each syllable dragged through pain. I tried to lift him, straining to pull him closer to the doorway, my old muscles burning from the effort. His skin was clammy, slick with sweat, and his face carried a shade of pale that terrified me. He was too young to look this broken. "Stay with me, son," I muttered, my voice shaking. "Don't you close those eyes." He coughed, the sound raw, and for a moment I thought I might lose him right there on the floor. His lips trembled, and he leaned closer, his breath warm but weak against my ear. "She tried to kill me." The words froze the blood in my veins. "What are you saying?" My voice cracked. "Carla," he rasped, forcing the name out as if it cut his throat to do so. Then another name. "Victor." It was like the air itself turned colder. He gripped my sleeve, his fingers barely able to hold on, eyes rolling back for a second before snapping open again. "I found it. In my drink. Poison." His chest heaved with the effort of each word. I wasn't supposed to live long enough to get here. For a moment, everything inside me wanted to scream, but nothing came out. My body trembled, but endurance born of too many hardships kept me steady. I forced myself to breathe, to stay upright, because he needed me more than I needed answers right now. I dragged him into the living room, the old rug beneath us catching drops of sweat from his brow. My hands shook as I grabbed the phone, dialing with a speed I didn't know I still had. The dispatcher's voice crackled on the other end, but my mind hardly registered the questions. I just shouted for an ambulance, my throat raw from panic. As I laid him back, I noticed the bruises, the strange marks along his arms, the faint chemical smell clinging to his clothes. Something unnatural, something deliberate. He clutched my hand, eyes darting, fighting to stay awake. "If I fall asleep, I won't wake up," he whispered. The words carved into me deeper than any blade. I squeezed his hand tight, holding on as though that alone could anchor him to this world. The sound of sirens grew closer, the red glow beginning to flash faintly against the walls outside. But even as help approached, dread seeped in like a shadow that wouldn't lift. This wasn't a sickness. This wasn't an accident. My son had been betrayed. As the sirens grew louder, I bent close and whispered, barely more than breath, "Carla, what have you done?" The fluorescent lights above hummed faintly. their glow bouncing off the sterile white walls. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and stale coffee, a mixture that did nothing to steady the weight pressing on my chest. I sat in the waiting room, my hands folded tightly, replaying every word Daryl had gasped out the night before. She tried to kill me. His voice, broken and weak, echoed in my ears, drowning out the distant beeping of machines and the occasional footsteps of nurses passing through the corridor. Every minute stretched into an hour. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, as if mocking me. I looked through the glass toward the hall where my boy lay, fighting for his life, and the thought of losing him made my throat burn. This was not just a sickness, not just fate. It was betrayal, delivered from within our own family. The door slid open with a rush of cool air, and Carla swept in like a storm. Her hair was messy, her face flushed, and she carried herself with the urgency of a grieving wife. She darted toward Daryl's room, tears spilling down her cheeks as she cried out his name. "Daryl, oh, God, what happened?" I didn't move. I watched her put on her performance, clutching his limp hand, stroking his forehead as though the world had collapsed around her. Her sobs were loud, too loud. Each gesture looked rehearsed, her anguish just a little too perfect. My chest tightened, not from sympathy, but from the realization that she was trying to sell a story no one had bought. Our eyes met for a brief moment. Hers glistened with crocodile tears, while mine stayed cold, unmoving. No words were spoken, but the silence between us roared louder than anything she could cry out. I knew, and she knew I knew. I turned my gaze away, staring out the window to the dim light of dawn creeping over Asheville, and there, outside the hospital doors, I caught sight of him, Victor D'Angelo. He stood on the curb, phone pressed to his ear, pacing back and forth like a restless wolf, his shoulders stiff, his gestures sharp, even from this distance. I recognized the unease in him, the kind of nervousness that comes from guilt. The sight of Victor set Daryl's whispered confession into stone. There was no mistaking the truth now. My son's collapse wasn't an accident, it was a plan, and Victor was part of it. I stayed still, quiet as ever, burning the moment into memory. Every detail of his coat, the way he ran a hand through his hair, the look of someone waiting for an answer he dreaded. I would hold on to that image until the time came to confront him. The door to the patient's room opened, and Dr. Ellison Craft entered. He carried a clipboard, his white coat crisp, his face calm in a way that felt unnatural. "Mr. Borden," he said softly, almost too softly, "your son is stable for now. We can't say for sure what caused this collapse." I leaned forward. "He was poisoned," I said, my voice low. The doctor hesitated, just a pause, barely a heartbeat. But it was enough. He shifted in his stance before recovering his polished calm. "We didn't find anything conclusive in the initial tests," he continued, eyes flicking toward Carla before landing back on me. "It could be exhaustion, dehydration, a number of things." His words were vague, his tone careful, too careful. I had lived long enough to recognize when a man was choosing his words not to inform, but to conceal. Carla sniffled beside Daryl's bed, brushing her tears away. "See? He's going to be fine, and once he's stable, I'll take him home. He'll heal faster with me there to care for him." The hairs on the back of my neck rose. Her voice was smooth, convincing, but the urgency in it wasn't born of love. It was hunger for control. I clenched my fists. Over my dead body would she get her hands on him again. I leaned closer, whispering to myself, "Not this time, Carla, not again." The morning sun filtered weakly through the blinds, but the light didn't bring comfort. By dawn, I knew the hospital would not keep my son safe. The war had just begun. The room carried that stale chill only hospitals know. Machines hummed softly, their lights blinking in rhythm with my son's shallow breaths. Carla sat close to his bedside, her fingers laced around his hand in a grip that looked tender to anyone else. But from where I stood, the pressure of her knuckles, the rigid way she held him, it felt less like comfort and more like possession. Watching her lean forward, whispering things he was too weak to hear, A knot formed in my chest. Every gesture seemed rehearsed, meant for an audience. The nurses moved quietly around us, adjusting monitors and checking vitals. Yet Carla never missed a chance to insert herself. When one nurse explained that Daryl needed rest without disturbance, Carla cut in with a sharp tone cloaked in concern. "I know what's best for my husband. I'll make sure he isn't overwhelmed." She dismissed me with a glance that told me where she believed I stood, on the sidelines. The words tightened in my throat, but I bit them back. Years of discipline taught me when silence was more powerful than protest. A few minutes later, I noticed Dr. Kraft hovering in the doorway. His shoulders seemed weighed down by something heavier than his lab coat. With a motion of his hand, he beckoned me aside, away from Carla's ears. His voice dropped to a low murmur. "Not everything here is what it looks like. Tread carefully, Mr. Borden." His eyes darted toward the room as though someone might be listening. The vagueness churned my stomach. If there was danger, why wouldn't he name it? The riddles left me both angry and unsettled. A man in his position should bring clarity, not shadows. When I returned, Carla was standing, arms folded, her stare meeting mine like a challenge. "You should rest," she said smoothly, though her meaning struck deeper. "Let me handle the decisions from here. Daryl needs calm, not conflict." Her words carried that subtle edge, a threat hidden beneath layers of civility. It was her way of pushing me out, removing the one person still standing between her and full control. My resolve hardened. I had spent a lifetime swallowing sacrifices for family. This time I would not swallow my voice. Then it happened. So quick it might have gone unnoticed if I hadn't been watching her closely. After a hushed exchange with Dr. Kraft near the doorway, Carla slipped a folded sheet of paper into her purse. Her fingers lingered over the clasp as though guarding treasure. My pulse kicked. A medical report. Maybe even one altered to fit her plan. She caught my gaze for the briefest second, her lips curling at the corners in a smile too thin to be kind. By sunrise, the truth seemed to be slipping away through cracks I couldn't seal. Carla. The morning light bled into the hospital corridors, washing the sterile walls in a pale glow. My feet carried me forward, steady but tense, toward Daryl's room. I wanted nothing more than to see him, to reassure him that his father was still here. But when I reached the door, a nurse stepped in front of me. "I'm sorry, Mr. Borden," she said, voice firm yet polite. "We've been told to limit visitors. You'll need to wait in the lounge." Her words stung more than I let show. I leaned on the cane I rarely used, trying to anchor myself. "Told by who?" The nurse avoided my eyes. "Your daughter-in-law asked for it." It felt like a punch to the chest. My own son, lying weak and pale behind those doors, and I, his father, was being kept away. I nodded stiffly and stepped back, the taste of helplessness sharp in my throat. Carla appeared a moment later, striding down the hallway in heels that clicked like hammers on tile. She smiled wide, the kind of smile meant to look sweet but cut sharp if you looked too close. "Lamar," she greeted me, her tone syrupy. "You should be resting. Stress isn't good at your age." The words slid under my skin like barbed wire. She wasn't concerned for me, she was warning me. Stay quiet. Stay still. Stay out of her way. I managed a thin smile, forcing myself to swallow the anger building inside. She passed by without waiting for my reply, the sway of her steps carrying both arrogance and menace. Later, I sat in the visitor lounge, a worn chair creaking beneath me. That's when Marjorie Knox, my neighbor, shuffled in. Her eyes darted nervously around the room before she lowered herself into the seat beside me. "Lamar," she whispered, glancing at the door. "I shouldn't even be saying this." Her hands trembled as she wrung them together. "Last night, I overheard Carla on the phone. She was talking to a man, Victor. I think they were whispering about papers and timing. It didn't sound right." My pulse quickened. "Marjorie, you have to tell someone. This could save Daryl." But her face crumpled with fear. "I can't. I don't want trouble. You know what happens to people who cross someone like her." Her words left me hollow. She had the truth, but fear was her prison, and it meant I was alone in this fight. When I finally made it back to Daryl's room, Carla was already there. She sat at his bedside, her lips near his ear, whispering something I couldn't hear. Daryl stirred faintly, eyes fluttering open before slipping shut again. It was a picture of possession, not care. She clutched his hand too tightly, as though she owned it, not cherished it. Watching them, I felt powerless, like a shadow fading in the corner of my own son's life. Yet inside, a vow took root. I would not be erased. Leaving the room, I walked slowly down the corridor, trying to steady my breath. Then I froze. Ahead of me, through the frosted glass of an office door, I saw Carla slip inside. It was Dr. Kraft's office. I edged closer, my heartbeat drumming in my ears. Through the haze of glass, I saw her hand something to him, an envelope. He accepted it without hesitation, tucking it away with a glance over his shoulder. My chest tightened. This wasn't just about a marriage gone wrong or even betrayal. Something larger was unfolding, and they were both in on it. I stood there, watching, the weight of certainty pressing down. Silence would no longer protect me, or my son. Harvey's arrival was quiet, almost too quiet for a man who had once filled every room with his voice. He slid into the chair across from me in the hospital cafeteria, his eyes darting around to make sure no one else was listening. His hand carried a small folder, thick enough to feel heavy in spirit if not in weight. He pushed it toward me with the same look a man gives when handing over bad news. "Lamar," he said, his voice rough with urgency, "you need to see this." I opened the folder slowly. Inside were copies of financial transfers, names, dates, numbers. My son's accounts were shrinking, siphoned away into places tied to Carla and hidden behind her. Victor. My chest tightened as if I had swallowed stone. "If you don't act soon," Harvey whispered, "you'll both lose everything. This isn't just about betrayal. It's a plan, and it's moving fast." The buzz of hospital chatter around us dulled, replaced by the echo of his words. Betrayal was one thing. Losing my son's future, his very stability, was another. The documents told a story of greed dressed as care. I folded them back into the folder and clutched it like a shield. Sitting there, I felt the years roll over me, decades of working, saving, sacrificing, all so my boy could have a life better than mine. Now, at 78, I found myself fighting the same way I did as a younger man, but with a weaker body and sharper fears. My duty as a father had not ended when Daryl turned 18. It was still carved into me, as real as the bones in my chest. The thought of Carla's hands steering his life, pulling him deeper into Victor's shadow, hardened something inside me. I had spent my life enduring, but this was no longer about endurance. It was about survival, for him, and maybe even for me. I pressed my palm against the cool table and made a vow under my breath. I would not let Carla strip him of everything. Not while I was still breathing. The decision had barely settled in me when Carla entered the cafeteria. Her eyes scanned the room like a hawk until they landed on me and Harvey. She approached quickly, her heels clicking sharp against the tile, each step louder than the last. "What are you doing here, Lamar?" she demanded, her voice rising just enough to turn heads. She threw a quick glance at Harvey, then back at me. "Whispering lies again, confusing Daryl with your paranoia." I stayed silent, the folder hidden at my side. Harvey shifted uncomfortably, but I raised a hand, signaling him to let me handle it. Carla stepped closer, her tone dripping with performance. "People are worried about you, Lamar, stirring up drama when your son needs peace. Maybe it's time you step back before you hurt him more than help him." Around us, the cafeteria stilled. Nurses paused mid-bite. A janitor stopped sweeping. I felt their eyes on me, weighing her words against my silence. For the first time in a long time, I felt the sting of humiliation. Carla had turned the public eye into her weapon, twisting truth into accusation. My heart pounded, but I gripped the folder tighter. She didn't know I had proof. Not yet. The crowd dispersed slowly after she left, but before walking away, Carla leaned in close, her lips almost touching my ear. Her voice dropped into a low, venomous whisper. You can't protect him forever, old man. Sooner or later, you'll be out of the way, and when that day comes, no one will remember your warnings. Her perfume lingered like poison as she stepped back, giving me one last smile that was all teeth and no warmth. The fear her words carried could have crushed me, but instead, it forged something harder. I had been underestimated before. She didn't see it, but my silence was not surrender. It was strategy. Later, I climbed the stairs back toward Daryl's room. My mind replayed Harvey's warning, Carla's staged performance, and the whisper that burned in my ear. Every step was heavy, but it carried me closer to my purpose. When I opened the door, the room was too quiet. The bed, where Daryl had lain only hours ago, was empty. Sheets were pulled back, monitors silenced. My heart dropped, thudding against my ribs. I called his name once, softly, as if he might answer from behind the curtains. Nothing. I rushed to the hall, scanning both directions, but saw no sign of him or Carla. The hospital walls seemed to close in, sterile and suffocating. For the first time since this nightmare began, true panic clawed at me. My son was gone. By nightfall, I realized Carla's game had only just begun, and Daryl's life was still in danger. The hospital room felt colder than usual when I stepped inside that evening. The sheets were rumpled, the monitors still blinking, but the bed where my boy had been lying was empty. A hollowness opened in my chest. My voice cracked as I asked the nurse on duty where he was. She avoided my eyes, flipping through a chart that held nothing. Finally, she mumbled that he had been transferred, but couldn't say to which ward. The words struck like ice. Transferred. Without me knowing, without even a trace of paperwork in his room. I refused to let it drop. My steps echoed through the sterile hallways as I went from one station to another. Every inquiry met with shrugs and nervous glances. Frustration churned into anger. When a young clerk finally slid a folder across the counter, my heart froze. There it was, my son's name, his supposed transfer authorization, and scrawled at the bottom, Dr. Ellison Craft's signature, the same doctor who had been dancing around answers since the night Daryl arrived. My fists clenched around the paper as if it could bleed out the truth. I found Dr. Kraft near the end of a dim corridor, his white coat swaying like a banner of authority he didn't deserve. "Where is my son?" I demanded, thrusting the paper toward him. His expression barely shifted, calm, detached. He dismissed it as a clerical error. He told me not to let my age and emotions cloud my judgment. He dared to suggest that I step aside and let professionals handle it. Rage burned hotter than my frail body should have allowed. I jabbed the paper closer to his chest. "Your signature is on this. Don't lie to me." His eyes hardened, and his voice dropped cold. "Walk away, Mr. Borden, for your own sake." That chill would haunt me long after the corridor emptied of his presence. I staggered out, gripping the rail by the wall for support, my breath uneven. Harvey appeared, his familiar presence steadying me. He placed a firm hand on my shoulder, his voice low but resolute. "This isn't just her. Lamar. Carla and Victor are playing a game bigger than you and me. They're pulling strings inside these walls." He looked at me, eyes fierce. "We'll find him, together. You're not alone in this." For the first time that day, I let myself breathe. The weight was crushing, but the fight wasn't mine alone anymore. We stepped out into the night air of the parking lot, the fluorescent lights humming overhead. The lot was nearly empty. The sound of our footsteps stretching into the shadows. Then I saw it. A black sedan gliding past the exit ramp, Carla's profile unmistakable behind the wheel. And in the passenger seat, Victor, his face caught in the glow of the dashboard. My blood ran cold. They weren't just circling the hospital anymore. They were moving him, shifting Daryl into a place where neither law nor family could reach. My grip on Harvey's arm tightened as the taillights disappeared into the dark. In that moment, the truth hardened into certainty. This was no longer about suspicion or whispers. My son was a bargaining chip, and his life was dangling in the hands of those who wanted everything we had. The war had begun in earnest, and retreat was no longer an option. The morning light cut through the blinds of my kitchen window, but it brought no peace. The phone rang with that sharp, officious tone only hospitals and institutions seem to have. When I picked up, the administrator's voice was polite, clipped, too rehearsed. "Mr. Borden, we need to address concerns raised by Mrs. Harlow," she said. "She claims you've been confused, interfering with the care process." The words stung like acid. My back stiffened in the chair. To them, I was just an aging man, easy to doubt. Carla knew exactly how to twist the knife, using my years, my silence, my grief as weapons against me. I pressed the phone harder to my ear. "Confused! My son nearly died in my arms. I've done nothing but protect him." The administrator hesitated, then shifted into the neutral tones of bureaucracy. "We just need you to be mindful. These allegations are serious." When the line went dead, the house felt colder. For the first time, I sensed the world tilting in Carla's favor. Harvey arrived not long after. He carried a thick folder under his arm, and that determined look I remembered from our younger years. "Don't let them break you, Lamar," he said as he set the folder on my table. "I've been digging at the clerk's office. There's something you need to see." His hands, weathered and steady, opened the file. The pages smelled faintly of dust and ink. Transfers, signatures, all filed too recently, too clean. The knot in my chest tightened. "What kind of transfers?" Harvey leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Property. If Darrell were incapacitated, Victor D'Angelo's name is written in as beneficiary." The room seemed to shrink around me. My son's house, my son's future, dangling on a forged signature. Rage surged hot, filling my chest until I had to grip the table to steady myself. "They're trying to erase him while he's still breathing," I muttered. We drove to the attorney's office, our footsteps echoing through marble halls that smelled of polish and paper. The clerk didn't look twice when Harvey requested the forms. To them, it was just paperwork. To me, it was a death sentence signed in ink. There it was. Darrell's name scratched onto the page, Victor's inserted neatly in the margin, and Dr. Kraft's initials, small, precise, damning, sitting at the bottom like a seal of betrayal. I wanted to tear the paper in half, but Harvey's hand stopped mine. "You can't. This is evidence now." "Rage won't win this war. Proof will." The words sank into me like stones. I nodded, swallowing the fire. Back home, I realized Carla's reach extended beyond legal documents. As I walked down my street, neighbors I'd known for decades looked away, muttering behind closed doors. Even Marjorie Knox, who once leaned on me for help fixing her fence, crossed the yard quickly and shut her door without a word. Carla's whispers had poisoned the air, painting me as a bitter old man losing his grip. The smear campaign was working. I felt stripped of dignity in my own neighborhood, where every familiar porch now felt hostile. Still, the ember inside me only burned hotter. Night fell heavy. The quiet pressed close against the windows. I sat in the living room, the documents from Harvey spread out before me, lit by the lamp's dim glow. That's when I heard it. A faint scrape, paper sliding across wood. I turned toward the front door. An envelope rested just inside. With shaking hands, I tore it open. Inside, thick black letters shouted off the page, "Stay out of this or you'll never see Darrell again." The message hit like a hammer. My chest tightened, but not with fear alone. Anger sharpened the fear into something stronger. They thought threats would stop me. They didn't know the years I'd survived, the losses I'd endured, the stubbornness carved deep into my bones. I held the letter up to the light, whispering into the dark room, "You'll regret underestimating me." The knock at my door that evening felt rehearsed, too deliberate to be casual. When I opened it, Carla stood there with Victor looming behind her. She carried herself like she owned the house, announcing with a bright, brittle smile, "We need a family meeting." The word family twisted in my chest. Harvey arrived a few minutes later, documents tucked under his arm. Marjorie Knox, my neighbor, was pulled in by Carla to act as some kind of witness, though her eyes darted nervously as if she wished she were anywhere else. We settled in the living room, a place that once held birthdays and quiet evenings, now turned into a courtroom. Carla perched on the edge of a chair, her hands folded as if she were a saint about to deliver judgment. "Lamar," she began, her voice smooth as silk. "Your constant interference is hurting Daryl. You're confusing him, making him paranoid. He needs stability, not your wild suspicions." I sat still, jaw tight, as Victor crossed his arms beside her, saying nothing but radiating menace. Carla leaned forward, her eyes glinting with false sincerity. "I'm his wife. I know what's best for him. You're exhausted. Lamar, at your age, this stress isn't healthy. Don't you think it's time to step back?" Every word was calculated, meant to paint me as frail, unstable, a relic clinging to relevance. The sting of it burned, but I'd been waiting for this. I let the silence stretch, then nodded to Harvey. He slid the manila folder across the coffee table toward me. With steady hands, I opened it and pulled out the papers. "You want to talk about what's best for Daryl? Then let's discuss these." I laid the forged property transfer documents on the table. Victor's name stared back at us in bold print, marked as a beneficiary if Daryl were incapacitated. The air cracked. Carla's smile faltered, her fingers tightening around the armrest. Victor shifted uncomfortably, avoiding my eyes. Marjorie let out a startled gasp. "I heard her on the phone," she blurted, voice trembling. "Late at night. She mentioned papers, and something about timing." She stopped, clutching her hands together. "But I can't get involved." I turned to her gently. "You already are, Marjorie." Her face flushed, and she sank back, unable to meet my gaze. Then, from the couch, a voice broke the tension, weak but unmistakable. Daryl stirred, his eyes half open, his words slurred but sharp enough to slice through the room. "Dad's telling the truth." Carla's head whipped toward him, panic flickering across her face. The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. For the first time, her carefully constructed story cracked, and doubt filled the room. She rose suddenly, snatching the papers from the table and flinging them to the floor. Her composure shattered as she shouted, "You'll regret crossing me, old man!" Her voice echoed off the walls, venom dripping from every syllable. Victor placed a hand on her arm, but she shook him off and stormed toward the door. I remained seated, my heart pounding but steady. The documents lay scattered at my feet, Daryl's frail voice still hanging in the air like a fragile thread of truth. As the front door slammed, I knew this was no longer a quiet war of whispers and forged signatures. This was open battle. And Carla had just declared it in my own house. The morning after the stormy gathering settled over the house like a heavy shroud. The walls seemed to hold their breath, as if they too had witnessed the venom that had poured into my living room the night before. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, but it did nothing to ease the weight pressing against my chest. Daryl lay slouched on the couch, his face pale but his eyes open, darting toward me with the quiet recognition of a man who'd finally begun to see the world without illusions. "I should have known sooner," he murmured, voice hoarse. His fingers trembled as they gripped the blanket. "The things she did, the things she gave me." His words faded into the silence that filled the room. The confession cracked something inside me. I sat down beside him, fighting the ache in my chest. He had lived under her shadow for years, swallowing suspicions and doubts until they nearly poisoned him. "You don't have to carry it alone anymore," I whispered. His eyes closed, and for the first time, I saw tears streaking down his cheeks. He spoke of bottles of pills Carla had pressed into his hand, claiming they were vitamins. He told me of nights she slipped out of bed, leaving him to wrestle with dizziness and nausea. He remembered arguments that always ended with her cold assurances that he was just tired. Each memory was another blade turned in my heart. Every word deepened my resolve. Whatever it took, I would not allow her to finish what she had started. But it also filled me with grief that my son had endured such cruelty in silence, too weakened to resist. A knock broke through our heavy stillness. I turned, my body tense, half expecting to see Carla barging in again. Instead, Marjorie Knox stood on the porch, her eyes darting nervously to the street before she finally stepped inside. Her hands twisted together as though she was holding back a storm of her own. "I can't keep quiet anymore," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I heard them that night. Carla and that man. I heard enough." Her eyes darted away from mine, as if ashamed. She spoke in fragments, words catching in her throat. "They mentioned papers. Timing. Making sure Daryl didn't recover." She swallowed hard, tears welling up. "I should have said something earlier, but I was scared. I didn't want trouble, but it's eaten at me every day since." I placed a hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "It's not too late," I said softly. What you know could make all the difference, but even as I spoke, I could see her hesitation clinging to her like a cloak. She offered only pieces, enough to confirm what I already knew, but not enough to bring the hammer down on Carla and Victor. Still, it was something, more than I'd had before. As Marjorie left, I felt a flicker of fragile hope, but it lasted only seconds. A sudden crash shattered the quiet, glass bursting inward as a rock hurtled through the front window. I ducked, shielding Daryl with my arms as shards scattered across the floor. Tied to the rock was a note, scrawled in thick black ink. "Snitches pay." I stood frozen, the paper crumpled in my fist, the sting of broken glass still in the air. They knew someone was talking, and now the fight was no longer hidden in whispers or backroom deals. It was war in plain sight. The envelope from the courthouse still sat on my kitchen table, its edges curled from the way I'd clenched it all afternoon. A restraining order, words on paper, stamped and signed, telling me I couldn't see my own son. After everything I had given, every sacrifice, now I was painted as a danger instead of a father. My pulse throbbed in my temples, but I forced myself to breathe. Anger wouldn't save Daryl, it would only prove Carla right. I walked outside, the autumn air sharp against my skin. Leaves scattered down the quiet street, and I felt the weight of eyes on me. Neighbors had started avoiding me, whispers rising the moment I turned my back. Carla's poison had spread beyond my son's veins. It had seeped into the community itself. The courthouse hallway was colder than any draft. I sat on a wooden bench, the notice trembling in my hands. When she walked by, heels clicking against the tile, her smirk carved deeper than any knife. She leaned in just enough so only I could hear. "You're finished, old man." Her perfume lingered long after she stepped away, sweet and suffocating. I clenched my jaw, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a reaction, let her think she'd won. Inside, a fire was growing, hotter than her smug triumph could quench. Harvey met me outside. His eyes carried the same storm mine did. "I found something," he said, lowering his voice. In the glove compartment of his old Chevy, he pulled out photocopies. Bank records. Hidden account under Carla's name. Money's been bleeding out of Daryl's funds for months. Large withdrawals. All tied back to her. I studied the papers. The numbers swimming in front of me. Proof. Cold. Undeniable proof. It was the first solid weapon I held against her, but it also made the pit in my stomach grow. The scheme was deeper than I'd imagined, and Victor's name lingered between the lines even if it wasn't printed there. That evening, Harvey arranged a brief call with Daryl, using a back channel through a sympathetic nurse. Static crackled on the line. Then his weak voice cut through, frayed and terrified. "Dad, she won't let me go." The words hollowed me out. His fear was more real than any bruise or scar. I closed my eyes, holding the receiver so tightly my knuckles ached. "Hold on, son. Just hold on." But the line went dead before I could say more. Back home, night fell heavy. The house creaked with its usual old bones. But there was a new sound, the squeal of hinges. I stepped outside, the porch light flickering against the darkness. My mailbox gaped open, the metal bent. Inside, a single note, scrawled in block letters. "Next time." It won't just be glass. The paper shook in my hand, not from fear, but from certainty. They were closing in. I wasn't just fighting for Daryl anymore. I was fighting for both of us to survive. The house had never felt so still. Shadows pressed against the windows, as if the night itself wanted in. I sat in my old chair by the front window, the barrel of a shotgun leaning against the armrest. My hand hovered close, not out of panic, but from a grim recognition of what was coming. Every creak in the floorboards, every groan of the timbers made the silence louder, heavier. The threats Carla and Victor had thrown at me circled through my head, wearing grooves in my mind. If they wanted to finish this, tonight would be the night. The clock ticked, slow and deliberate. Somewhere out there my son was still under their grip, weakened but alive. The thought kept me rooted in that chair. Fear was there, of course, but it had hardened into something else. A man can only be pushed so far before fear turns into resolve. A soft knock startled me, not at my door, but at the side fence. I rose carefully, shotgun in hand, and peered through the curtains. Marjorie Knox stood there in the dim glow of her porch light, wringing her hands. She looked smaller than ever, her shoulders hunched, her face pale. Against every instinct, I stepped out onto the porch, glancing both ways before motioning her over. "Mr. Borden," she whispered, her voice shaking. I shouldn't be here, but I can't keep it in anymore." Her eyes darted to the street, as though Victor himself might appear from the darkness. She leaned in close, trembling like a leaf in wind. "I saw him," she said. "Victor, he was in your backyard 2 nights ago, whispering on the phone, to Carla." The words hit harder than the cold night air. My grip on the shotgun tightened. I asked her why she hadn't told me sooner. Marjorie swallowed hard, shame flooding her voice. "I was scared. I still am. But hearing that window break the other night, I couldn't sleep. I know what they're doing isn't right." I should have spoken up before. Her confession was like pulling a nail from an old wound, painful but necessary. I nodded, forcing my voice steady. "You did the right thing tonight. That's what matters." Before I could say more, the phone rang inside. The sound split the night like a blade. I hurried in and lifted the receiver, my heart thudding. On the other end was Daryl's voice, weak but clear enough to send chills through me. "Dad!" His breath rattled. There's something I remembered. The night she tried to poison me, I heard Carla. She was on the phone with Victor. She said, "Tomorrow, we finish this." The silence that followed was heavier than his words. My throat tightened. So the collapse at my door wasn't the end of their plan. It was only the start. "Son," I said softly, "you hold on. Whatever they're planning, I won't let it happen." The line went dead, leaving only the echo of his rasp in my ear. I stood frozen, the weight of his warning pressing down like a stone on my chest. And then I heard it, outside my own door this time. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate, crunching against the gravel walk. My breath caught as the doorknob rattled once, twice, metal scraping in the silence. I raised the shotgun, every muscle taut. The years of age falling away in that one moment of clarity. My voice dropped to a whisper, steady as iron. "If it's you, Victor," I said, eyes fixed on the shaking knob. "You've picked the wrong night." Dawn crept through the curtains, casting long pale streaks across the floorboards of my living room. It didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a courtroom, and the verdict was finally at hand. Carla sat stiff in a chair, her eyes sharp, her lips pressed into a line that pretended calm but betrayed fury. Victor hovered near her, restless, like a caged animal ready to bolt. I stood between them and my son, Daryl, who sat weakly on the couch with Harvey at his side. For once, there were no shadows left to hide in. "You wanted everything out in the open," Carla snapped, her voice tight. "So let's have it. What more can you possibly throw at us?" I didn't answer. My years taught me that silence carries more weight than shouting. Instead, I nodded to Harvey. He pulled a small folder from his worn briefcase and laid it on the coffee table. The air in the room thickened as he spoke. "These are bank records," Harvey said, his tone steady but edged with fire. "Transfers from Daryl's accounts into one controlled by Carla Harlow. The signature authorization, Dr. Ellison Kraft." Victor shifted, but Harvey continued before he could speak. Here's a recording, too, taken from a line Carla didn't realize was tapped. You'll hear her voice, planning with Victor, confirming the timing of the poison. The sound of Carla's voice filled the room from Harvey's small recorder, cold, calculated, unmistakable. For a moment, even Victor looked rattled. Darrell pressed a trembling hand to his forehead, his breathing ragged. So it was real, he whispered. All those nights, all those drinks you pressed on me. His voice cracked. You were trying to kill me. Carla leaned forward, her mask finally cracking. I did it for us, Darrell, for your future. Your father's been clinging to control for too long, holding you back, keeping the money tied up. I wanted us free. Wanted you free. Can't you see that? Her words cut into me like broken glass. She twisted love into a weapon, using guilt as her shield. For a moment, Darrell's eyes closed as though he might yield, the old habit of believing her pulling at him. My heart pounded in the silence. Then he opened his eyes, and the weakness was gone. His voice, though hoarse, carried steel. No, Carla, you poisoned me. You stole from me. You betrayed everything a wife should be. You'll never touch me or this family again, Victor muttered under his breath, taking a step toward him, but I moved between them. Not another step, I said, the old fire in my chest burning brighter than fear. At that moment, red and blue lights flashed through the window. A firm knock followed, and Harvey exhaled. That would be the police. I called them before I came here. The door opened, and uniformed officers entered. In a blur of handcuffs and sharp commands, Carla's protests turned into shrill screams. Victor's curses echoed down the hallway, and Dr. Kraft, brought in by another pair of officers, hung his head in silence. The house fell still after they were taken away. Darrell leaned into the couch, tears streaking his pale cheeks. I gripped his hand, holding it like a lifeline, neither of us speaking for a long while. When the quiet settled deep, I looked around at the home I had built, the walls that had once echoed with family laughter. Betrayal had crept in here, smiling at my table, poisoning my son, trying to strip me of dignity. But evil had been dragged into the light, and in that light, it withered. I spoke softly, not to Darrell, not to Harvey, but to the years behind me and the audience of elders who might understand. In the end, evil wasn't just outside, it was inside, wearing familiar faces. But justice comes when you stand firm, when you refuse silence, when you protect your blood, even when the world tells you to sit down. Darrell squeezed my hand. His strength was faint, but it was there. I leaned back, letting the dawn fill the room. I lost pieces of my peace, I whispered, but I kept my soul intact. And that, no thief, no traitor, can ever take away.